Hello, I'm journalist, blogger and Get the Gloss columnist Madeleine Spencer, and I'm going to recommend some books today that I've read and think would be brilliant during this Christmas period when, let's face it, we're all inside a lot more and reading is quite a good pastime, and that might be good Christmas presents if you're buying a book for someone. So the first one I'm going to recommend is Emmeline Pankhurst's My Own Story. Now, I thought when I picked this up that it might be a bit dense and a bit kind of like wading through, treacle and just not a very good read, but something that I wanted to read because I'm interested in Emmeline Pankhurst's life because she was so instrumental in the suffragette movement and a very interesting woman. But I have to say it's a good read, independent of how brilliant she is and what she did for women's rights. It's absorbing and you want to read it, and actually I found it to be quite a page turner. I turned down loads of pages of bits that I thought were really interesting. So I'd really recommend this, particularly if you want to learn more about Emmeline Pankhurst's life, or if you're a feminist and you want to kind of know more about the history of the movement. The next book that I love is completely opposite end of the scale. It's just a really, really good story and quite scandalous. It's a book called Lace by Shelley, and I read this last Christmas. My friend Rebecca Reid, who's a journalist and author, we were having a conversation about books, and I was saying, I really love good stories, and she went, oh, like Lace, and I hadn't read it, and she bought it for me for my birthday, and I absolutely loved it. It's huge, but if you want to fall into a story, it is absolutely fantastic, and yeah, it was, I think, one of the best-selling books of the 80s, so very, very good. Lace by Shelley, really good book. While I'm on Rebecca Reid, I have her book here called Perfect Liars. It's her debut novel. And the thing that I loved about this book, it's like a murder mystery. But the thing I like, a thriller rather, not murder mystery, a thriller. But the thing I liked about it was all the characters were people that you kind of recognise. When you read a book and you sit there and go, oh, I know someone who's just like that. But these all have sort of sinister, their characters have sinister little edges, and it's well written and really absorbing. So I read it in about, I think it was about 6 or 7 hours. So it's a really good one if you just want to go through a book really quickly. Next one, Nick Hornby, About a Boy. I love watching that film, particularly around this time of year. And if you like the film, you'll definitely like the novel. It's very funny and very well written and slightly different to the film, but not too much. So if you like the film, you'll like the book. Next one. Short stories. Okay, I think short stories are absolutely fantastic on these kind of dark days because you could say pick up a book at 4 o'clock and finish the short story by 4:30 or whatever it is, and feel like it's quite satisfying to finish a story, right? I find it satisfying anyway. So Roald Dahl, Madness. Roald Dahl obviously he writes brilliant children's books, but his short stories are fantastic, and Madness is a collection of very good books. They're all a bit sinister, to warn you. They're a little bit dark and weird, and they deal with the darker side of humanity. They're not like uplifting in the way his children's books are, but they are very, very, very good. Right, so there's a publisher called Persephone that I really go to quite often. They have a shop in Bloomsbury. And they used to have a shop in Notting Hill Gate, and I'd go into it and look around for ages. And I really like the way their books are, I like the look of the book. I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and I definitely like the content, but they are stylish, and I really like them, so good for gifts. And this book is The Victorian Shalong, which is a word I can never say, by Margarita Lasky. And it's very bizarre, but very intriguing. So in it, a woman falls asleep, maybe in the 40s, 50s, on her chaise, and she wakes up in the Victorian era with consumption. But it's not like it doesn't give you an easy answer. It's a really weird book. If you imagine that happened to you, exactly what your response would be is kind of her response and what happened. So it's very well written, and it's very odd but fascinating. So I'd really recommend that if you want something maybe a bit more sinister. Another book that you've probably already read, but just in case you haven't, This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay is funny and moving and all the things everyone says it is, and just a very, very good book and very illuminating about the NHS. There's a character in it, a homeless man called MJ, who I found hilarious and is definitely my favourite character, my favourite story in the whole book. I think it's brilliant. So if you haven't read that, very good one to read. Next one, story of two amazing women, but again, told very well. So this is about Mary Wollstonecraft, who was a writer in the late 1700s. She was a very scandalous woman in the late 1700s. She had a child out of wedlock. She kind of ran off and did what she wanted to do and wrote books, supported herself, then married William Godwin when she fell pregnant because she'd had such a bad experience having her first child that she thought she should marry the father of her second child. But then she died right after giving birth to Mary Godwin, who went on to become Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. So this tells Mary Wollstonecraft's story and Mary Shelley's story, and it tells them chapter by chapter. It's very engrossing, it's very well written, and it's funny, and the characters and the people you find out about in it are really, really interesting. And again, many pages turned down. Very, very good read. And I've recommended this to loads of people who aren't necessarily into Mary Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft, but who have loved it. So this is a very, very good read. And yeah, I just love every page of that pretty much. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm learning so much and it's really intriguing. Next book, if you want to read something that's just very well written, maybe a classic and you haven't read it and you just wanted to kind of read something that was very beautifully crafted, Thomas Hardy, Jude the Obscure. Now, it's the kind of thing that maybe your teacher mentioned it to you at school and you think, oh, I really don't fancy reading that. And I get that, but I would encourage you, if you want to read, like I said, a classic that's well written, to reconsider this, because it's a very good story about a man who's trapped in the circumstances of his life. He's born in the Victorian era. He wants to make something of himself. He's got this entrepreneurial spirit and he wants to learn, but he's completely trapped in his life. And there's a lot in it that I think is just really intriguing and tragic, and actually resonates with me now. When I was reading it, I was thinking, this still happens today. It's really, really, really brilliant. There are a few bits of it that are so beautifully written that I kind of have, again, turn back pages and go back to them again and again. And actually, this tattoo is a quote from Jude the Obscure. I really, really love this book. It's very, very moving. But don't read it if you're already sad. You've got to, read it in the right mindset. If you're feeling a bit blue, it's not the book for you. But if you just want to read something brilliant and you're feeling kind of okay, it's a good one. Okay, Stefan Zweig it wrote a book called The Post Office Girl. So he wrote, actually, I think this is a novella. I think he only wrote one book called Beware of Pity, which I've also read. I've read everything he's written. Beware of Pity is a brilliant novel. This is shorter. And what he does is he puts his characters into very interesting psychological sort of situations that test their psychology. So this girl is taken by her aunt, almost like a Cinderella story. She's very poor. She lives in this attic with her mum, who's very sick. And she works in a post office, and her life is really, I wouldn't say mundane, but it's, she does the same thing every day, and she doesn't realise that her life is mundane. And then her aunt whisks her away to, I think it's Switzerland. She suddenly realises that life is can be full of colours and pleasure and joy. And then, like that, it's gone. And it really affects her. And I'll leave you to read it and find out what happens to her. But it's a very, very good book. And again, very well written. Because I care a lot about, because I write, so I care a lot about the way things are written. The books I've chosen are all really well written. That's a common theme. The next one is a really fun book that's very jaunty and uplifting. It's What Happens Now by Sophia Money-Coutts. I know is it Sophia? Yes, it's Sophia, it's not Sophia. And Sophia Money-Coutts wrote this book about a woman who gets pregnant, having a kind of one-night stand, and then basically has to figure out what to do next. The guy she has a one-night stand with sounds very foxy, and it's kind of like one of those books where you read it and you think, oh, this is really fun. Bit, I don't say Bridget Jonesy, but, it's got that thing where you feel like it's set in the modern day. It's the kind of characters that you know and love. And Sophia is a really confident, good writer, so you kind of whisked through it quite quickly, and it's very fun. Final book that I'm going to recommend is Iris Murdoch, The Sea. Now, this won the Booker Prize. It's a fantastic book. I recommended this at the book club that I host, I think 7 or 8 years ago, and it's all kinds of waifs and strays in my book club. It's not like just people who are writers. There's a lot of people who don't really read very often and wanted to join so that they could have good recommendations. And they all read this book, and everyone unanimously came back and said it was fantastic and that they would, always have a copy of it on their shelf for the rest of their life. It's about a man called Charles Araby who retires from the London theatre life to the seaside. It's got a lot of beautiful imagery about the sea, and if you like swimming in natural bodies of water, you'll love the descriptions of that. But Charles Araby moves to the countryside, and all of his eccentric friends basically decide to join him. Then he bumps into the woman that he thought was the love of his life, who he lost when he was younger, and he kind of decides that he's going to be with her. and it goes from there. It's very well written. It's very eccentric and fun, and I would really, really recommend it. So those are all the books that I think would be great reads this winter if you're looking for something to really hunker down with. And I think all of them would be quite good presents for the right person. So I hope you enjoyed watching that. Let us know under here if you've read any of them or if you're going to read any of them. And I hope you enjoy snuggling up with a good read over the next few months. Bye.